Let's get at it. Y'all ready to get at this? Here we go. Reach in, grab out your message notes. On the top of it, it says Satan's favorite lies. Go ahead and grab that out. And then, you ever been somewhere where they said, take your cell phone, turn it off, no flash photography, take all the pictures you want. Video anything you want. But here's what I would encourage you to do. One of my goals in life is to strengthen the inner lives of Christians because people live better. A second one is to give them wisdom because here's my theory about life. Would you agree with this, by the way? Nobody lives well until they think well. The beginning of living well is thinking well. And so a couple years ago, we put something together that is free. It is a 4-minute morning video devotional delivered now to tens of thousands of people from all around the country. And all you have to do, anybody got a phone here? Good. Go ahead and get it out right now if you want. Text the word refuel, R-E-F-U-E-L. Text the word refuel to John 3:16, JN 316, or text refuel to 56316. And then every morning at 7 in the morning, you will get a free text from us. Open the text, and it will take you to a 4-minute inspirational video from myself or Francis Chan or Albert Tate or a whole bunch of people from all around the country. And people are doing this every morning. We decided, you know what? Let's help people think well, and let's inspire people in the morning when nobody's inspired. And so if you want that, it is absolutely free. It was kind of a cool thing. I was talking to an 18-year-old high school kid. I walked onto a campus a while back, and this kid said to me, he goes, good to see you, Pastor Ray. He goes, I just recommitted my life to Christ, but my buddies, man, they're all over me to drag me down. It's hard. I said, you got a phone? He goes, yeah. I grabbed this kid's phone. I texted refuel to 56316. I handed the kid back and said, kid, you're going to hear from God every morning at 7 in the morning. And he goes, I'm not up then. Well, yeah, you will be now. Okay, so grab your message notes out. We did a series at Bayside called Satan's Favorite Lies. And what I realized is this: life is tough. One guy said this: life is tough. Takes all your time. Think about it. And he goes, takes all your time, and what do you get at the end of it? He said, I think the life cycle is all backwards. You should die first, get that out of the way. Then you live for 20 years in an old age home. Then you get out of the old age home and you get a job and you go to work. And you work for 30 years until you're young enough to enjoy your retirement. Okay? Then what happens is you spend your teenage years and then you spend the last 10 years of your life being a little kid playing games, and you end up floating around for 9 months and you end up as a gleam in somebody's eye. Any takers? I was saying, the problem is this: life gets discouraging. Watch this. If you've been discouraged in the last year, raise your hand. If you've been discouraged in the last month, raise your hand. If you were discouraged on the way to church here today, raise your hand. If the main source of your discouragement is sitting next to you, don't raise your hand. And here's the deal. Of all the lies Satan tells to discourage people, the number one lie is this: it's just too late. Those are the 4 most discouraging words in the English language. It's just too late. And you thought it was the Raiders are staying. No, the 4 most discouraging words are this: it's just too late. It's too late for you, too late for your finances, too late for your future, too late for your family, too late for your marriage, too late to ever be happy again. It's just too late. And so what I do is I put a list together of people in the Bible that felt like that. And I'm going to see if anybody got a pen? Check the ones that have happened to you as I go through this list. Peter, it's just too late. I've failed too often. Anybody here fail anything ever? Put a check, okay? I've lost too much. That's Job. I'm too discouraged. That's Elijah. I've been thrown out of a boat. I feel too rejected. Jonah. I'm too old. Check that. Abraham. My background is too dysfunctional. That's Joseph. Anybody here if you're a kid and your parents are, don't raise your hand. Anybody come from a dysfunctional family? Anybody here comes from a dysfunctional family? Joseph's brothers dug a pit, threw him in the pit, and then sold him into slavery in another. This is a dysfunctional family, people, okay? That's how Joseph felt, okay? I love Lazarus. It's too late for me because I'm already dead. Timothy, I'm too insecure. Joseph, the temptation's too high. A woman is in his house tearing his clothes off. Elijah, the obstacles are too big. If this has happened, by the way, watch this. If you have had more than one of these things happen to you, would you raise your hand? Okay? One guy in the Bible had all these things happen to him at the same time. His name, Moses. His name was Moses. And as the start of Exodus chapter 14, as the sun rises, 3 things about Moses. Number one, they're going to go on the screen. Number one, Moses had a childhood of privilege. He was Prince Charming of Egypt, raised in the plush palace of Egypt. Okay? Second is this. He had a background of failure. At age 40, he tries to do God's work his way, and he murders a guy. And has to go to the desert and hide for 40 years, which means this. Moses is now 80 years old. Does it do anything for you to know this? Nothing great from God ever happened in Moses' life until he was 80. Does that help anybody out there? And God says to Moses, I want to set my people free, go to Pharaoh. The problem is this, the odds are totally against him, okay? Because Moses is kind of a stuttering, insecure, 80-year-old guy, and Pharaoh is like Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and Obama all in one person, okay? And don't write me a letter. And the matter of fact, we actually know which Pharaoh it was. It was Ramses II. Now, we don't know what Moses looked like. Probably Charlton Heston. We don't know what Moses looked like. We do know what Ramses II looked like. Why? Because Ramses II was an egomaniac who thought everybody should know what he looked like, so he built these massive monuments with his face on them. You want to see one? There it is. That's Ramses II with the coolest goatee in Egypt and the biggest ears. And so what happens is God says to Moses, go to Pharaoh, and here we go. Go to Pharaoh and say, let my people. Pharaoh says, no. So let my people go. No. God says, oh. And Pharaoh makes a strategic mistake. Pharaoh says, like dissing God, who is the Lord that I should obey him? God, being God, of course, overhears this. And God decides to show Pharaoh exactly who he is, and he gives him 10 audio-visual presentations of who he is and how much power he has. We know those as the plagues. Frogs are everywhere, flies are everywhere. At the end of the 10th plague, Pharaoh finally says, hey, take these people and get out of town. So Moses takes how many people? Anybody know? How many people? 2 million people. Raise your hand if you have ever tried to get kids or anybody to line up. Imagine this, 2 million people. All right, line up. We're leaving. 2 million people back. And I don't know, do they go single file, 2 by 2? How do they do this thing? So they're in Egypt. They are leaving to go to the promised land. Okay, they are leaving to go to the promised land. Okay, 2 million people. They all line up. They all start leaving Egypt. Here they go. Finally, a long while later, the first guy in line stops, and he can't go forward because he's run into the Red Sea. Anybody here ever play Whisper down the line? So he turns around and he goes, pass this back. We can't go forward. There's a sea. Pass this back. We can't, the sea. We can't go forward. The sea. All the way back. 2 million people. The problem is this. 2 million people back. The last guy in line, who I think's the laziest dude in town. He's kind of like, okay. I mean, occasionally somebody in front of him stops. He runs into him. He sort of hears a noise. He turns around. Pharaoh has woken up the next morning and goes, what do? We could have had a slave. They've all left town. Let's go get them. They get like hundreds of chariots, horses. The whole army saddles up, and dust clouds because the whole army's coming to kill them and capture them. So this guy looks back and goes, no, pass this forward. Hurry up, go forward. There's an army coming to kill us. So that starts going up. There's an army coming to kill us. At the same time, this whole thing, we can't go forward. There's a sea, can't go forward. There's a sea. And from the back now, the message coming, hurry up and go forward. There's an army coming to kill us. I always thought, who's the poor sucker in the middle that gets both messages at the same time? This is not a good day. And what happens is this. The people react really badly. And they do 5 very destructive things. And what I'm going to do is go to that section of your notes. What I'm going to do is see where it says destructive responses 1 through 5. I am going to read you the notes under these things, and then I'm going to give you the destructive responses they had. And so I'm going to read all the verses underneath theirs, because here's what happens. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites, what's the next word? Circle the word looked. What you look at, what you focus on, a big deal. Looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. Then they were what? Circle the word terrified. What you focus on always determines your inner condition. Your circumstances don't determine your inner condition. What you focus on determines that, okay? And he says this, so then they said to Moses, I love this, they go, oh, Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt you brought us out to the desert to die? Whine, whine, whine. Why have you done this by bringing us out of Egypt? And then notice below, didn't we say to you in Egypt, Moses, let us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. By the way, is that what they were saying in Egypt? That's a flat out lie. When they were in Egypt, they were going, Moses, get us out of here. He gets them out of there. Now they're going, Moses, we told you to leave us alone. Okay. Then what happens next is this. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. They have 5 destructive responses. And here they are. Okay. Number 1 is this, looking only at circumstances. Looking only at circumstances. What you focus on determines your inner condition, and they stop looking at God and they only look at their circumstances. Okay? I know a lot of people, they're, by the way, you know anybody, they're permanently unhappy. They don't enjoy life, they endure it. Their face looks like the front cover for the book of Lamentations. They're Christian Eeyores. But it's never their fault. Why? They're looking only at problems, and number 2, they're blaming everybody else. They're blaming everybody else. It's the pastor's fault. Oh, the music's too loud. Oh, my husband's an idiot. Oh, whatever, all this kind of, and they're, by the way, you know the real problem with blame? Blame paralyzes you. It stops you from getting better because you never fix the problem. You fix the blame, and you cannot fix the blame and solve the problem at the same time. Matter of fact, if you want to know how to spell blame, be lame. Blame. Blame paralyzes. Okay? Number 3, they developed a totally negative perspective. Didn't we say to you in Egypt, let us alone? We're so negative. Anybody know people, Christians like that? Everything's negative. Okay? Matter of fact, I want to give you a great quote. Check this out, okay? Self-pity is a crippling emotional disease that severely distorts our perception of reality, okay? Number 4, they make rash, unhealthy decisions. They make rash, very unhealthy decisions. It would have been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. And last is this. Oh, by the way, if you're taking notes, let me tell you a quick story. I'm going to have you write a phrase down there. I was an atheist growing up. I mean, I grew up an atheist, jet set, executive, alcoholic, rageaholic dad. I mean, just kind of a wild thing. Played sports, never went to church, thought Christians were intellectually idiots. And I talked a guy out of becoming a Christian when I was 18 years old, which does not look good on the pastor's resume. And then it took 6 months, and I went to a church like this, and I went, this is not what I thought. And it took me 6 months to cross the line of faith. I ended up becoming a Christian. And then I was a Christian about 3 months. And some discouraging things happened. And you know what? I quit. I basically went, I'm out. I actually took my Bible, threw it across the room, into a corner of the room, and I said, God, I'm out. I'm no longer a Christian. About 2 weeks later, a buddy of mine, kind of an older guy that was kind of working with me some. We had breakfast, and he said, "What's up? You look down." And I told him the whole story. And he saved the rest of my life, which I'm going to do for you right now with one line. He looked at me and he said, "You know what your problem is?" He said, "Your problem is when you were down, you made a decision." And he looked at me and said, "I want to give you a life principle, and I have never forgotten this, and I've lived by this." He looked at me and said, "Never make a decision when you're down." That's brilliant, isn't it? He looked at me and said, "If I made decisions when I'm down, I'd be divorced. I wouldn't have my wife. I wouldn't have my kids. I wouldn't have my family. Wouldn't have my job." He goes, "When you," and I agree. By the way, is anybody else wired like me? The second something discouraging happens, I start making all kinds of decisions. Anybody else wired like this? Like, I quit, I'm out. I'm quitting on my marriage, quitting on church, quitting whatever. And the minute somebody gets discouraged, we make all kinds of decisions. Never make any decisions when you're down. It's always the wrong decision. Does that make sense? Okay. Number 5 is this. Just simply give up. The discouraging people, usually the decision they make is, let's just quit. Now, keep your notes right there. Those are 5 destructive things. And I want to tell you a quick story. Has anybody here ever been to the state of Florida? Who's been there? Who has not been there? Good. Don't go. I was all excited. I'm going to Florida, the Sunshine State, Miami, all this kind of stuff. And I was invited to speak at a deal down there a few years ago. I went to Florida, and I went, this is the most overrated state in America. Would you agree? Here's Florida. If you've never been there, don't go. Take Fresno. Add humidity, mosquitoes, alligators, and every bug in the world. You got Florida. That is Florida, okay? And so I go to Florida, and I'm speaking at a conference, and it was freaky. Every step you take in Florida, something scurries away or flies away. It's a weird deal. And so I'm at this conference speaking, and it is like sweltering hot. And it's October, and it's sweltering hot, humidity, everything. It's like you're sticky, and I think I'm going to go swimming. So I go down a big old dock at this beautiful conference center, and they have a huge lake, and I go, I'm going to go swimming in this lake. Take off my shirt, and I'm just getting ready to dive in. It's only one old codger on this dock, and he's smoking a pipe, and I'm getting ready to dive in this lake, and this old codger takes his pipe out, looks at me and goes, "Hey, young man, boy." He goes, "I wouldn't dive in that lake." "Oh, really, why?" He goes, "You are about to dive into the number 2 alligator-infested lake in the state of Florida, and you're going to dive into it." And I went, "Really?" Because I thought he was joking. He goes, "Take a look." I'm on the edge of this dock, getting ready to dive in, and I hadn't noticed them. Anybody ever seen an alligator crocodile in the water? Little nostrils, little beady eyes, little bumps on there. In like 10 seconds, I see 12 of them, and they're all lined up just like this. And I know they're all looking at me thinking the same thing. Lunch is coming. And so I go, whoa. And I mean, they're like from me to the third row. They're all just kind of lurking there going, "Come on, baby. Come on, sucker, get in the water. We're going to eat you alive." And so I put my shirt back on, go over, and I sit down next to this old codger. Like, "Hey, man, thanks for saving my life." And he goes, and so we're talking about it. I said, if I dove in there, I was about to dive into the number 2 alligator. I said, "There's a lot of gators in there." And he takes his pipe out, and I think he wanted to like impart a Florida lesson. He goes, "Yep, you got a lot of gators you'd have been swimming with." And he said to me, he goes, "But it doesn't take a lot. It only takes one." That's brilliant, isn't it? I have given you 5 destructive responses. I've seen people blow up their marriage and wreck their home just by doing one of these. I've seen people that were happy become miserable just by doing one of these. I've seen these 5 things. Each individual one has the power to wreck your life, ruin your relationships, and destroy your future. What, for God's sake, do not let Satan use any one of these things to eat you alive. Got it? And so you go, well, then how do you respond? Glad you asked. Turn to the next page. Moses gives them 5 other steps to take to counteract this garbage, okay? And y'all ready for these, by the way? I know it's a lot of content from the Bible. Is everybody with me? Okay, good, like 7 days. Is everybody with me? Moses says, here are 5 better ways to live. And the first one is this: do not fear. Do not fear. And Moses answers the people, do not be afraid. Why? Because, and you can read this later, people, fear and anxiety will rob you of the energy that it takes to get to a better place. Okay? In other words, you can write this down if you want. Faith is a choice and fear is a choice. And here it is. Whenever something happens, you can react with fear or respond with faith. Number 1, do not fear. Then he doesn't stop there. He says, Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm. Second thing he says is, take your stand. Take your stand. What does that mean? This is a heavyweight point. If you want God's best for your future, which is called the promised land, you want God's best for your future, there is only one way to get there, and here it is. Go in the right direction, even when it's tougher. Would you agree? The right road is almost never the easy road. Would you agree? It's almost never the easy road. I'll give you an example of that. A while back, I was in Mexico, and I was speaking to a sea of teenagers, and I gave almost this exact message. And I said to these teenagers, if you want God's best for your future, if you want God's plans, God's plan, I said, you will never get there until you let go of destructive things that are holding you back. In other words, you want God's best, you got to go in God's direction, even when it's harder and tougher. And I said, matter of fact, some of you, there's some things you can't go in that direction if you keep running back. I said, some of you are dating somebody that's tearing you down instead of building you up. And it may be hard, but the best direction is to break up with that person that's tearing you down. I said, some of you need to let go of some of you are bitter. You need to let go of bitterness. That's not God's direction for your future. Some of you are racked by guilt, all of this kind of stuff. And then I said to these teenagers, some of you, you're drinking and you're partying. That is not God's direction. And I don't care how much peer pressure you get. Some of you need to take your alcohol. Or I said, some of you we're on a mission trip. Some of you brought alcohol and drugs. And I said, if that's the case, I got a sure cure. You need to let it go. You need to throw it away because go in the right direction even when it's tougher, and you will have God's best for your future. And I actually said to these teenagers, I said, I have a solution. I don't care if you brought alcohol or drugs. Here's what you should do with them. The minute this meeting's over, go over to those. And outside, we had these hot Mexican outdoor bathrooms that have been in the hot Mexican sun used by thousands of teenagers for 5 days. What do you think they smell like? Okay? And I said, take your alcohol, take your drugs, go open the door, go in there, take your flashlight, shine down in there, see what you're dropping that stuff into, and then take all your alcohol, all your drugs, and throw them in there. And later, if you're actually tempted to climb down in there and get that stuff back, you got a problem, come save me. So I do this thing. I give this massive invitation to make a commitment to go in the best direction, and a ton of kids stand. And now it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm sitting on the stage talking to groups of kids, and one group was sort of on the outskirts. They had gone, disappeared, and then come back. And the last group, now it's almost midnight, and these 3 teenagers come up, very sharp kids, 2 very sharp high school juniors and a high school guys and a high school sophomore girl. And they come up and they say, can we talk to you? And I said, absolutely. And they said, we just want to thank you for tonight. We committed ourselves to Christ again, and we committed ourselves to, no matter what it takes, going in God's best direction. And they said, and there's something we got to let go of. And I said, what's that? And they said, here. And they handed me this huge stash of marijuana. And my first thought was, hey, now we can pay for the church. This is awesome. I'm kidding. No, I did not inhale. And you know what's cool? I said to these 3 kids, I said, follow me. We went over. I opened the door to one of these outhouses. I made them walk in, and these teenage kids, high school, sophomore, and juniors, took all of their drugs and all of their alcohol and threw it all away. And then I came out with them. I put my arms around them and I prayed for them and for their future. And they they recommitted themselves to Christ and to going in the best direction. And it's now 12:30 at night, and I'm watching them in the Mexican moonlight walk back to their team, back to their church, and back to their future. And would you agree with me? I thought to myself as I watched these kids walk in the Mexican moonlight, they have just saved themselves and their parents and their friends and everybody that knows them from years of heartache. Would you agree? When you go in the best direction, even when it's tougher, you end up in the promised land. It is the only way. So Moses says to these folks, do not fear. Take your stand. Go in the right direction. And then he says this, how do you get strength? Rely on the promises of God. In other words, you rely on the promise. He says, stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. I love that. God goes, I'll fight for you. Just shut up and stand there. And then, by the way, then what's the right step to take? Here it is. Point 4 is this. Go forward. He says, go forward. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to go which direction? Forward, okay? Why is this a big deal? People, this is huge, okay? Nobody goes forward well when they are looking back. All of a sudden, these people are going, let's go to the promised land. Oh, it's going to be tougher than I thought. Why don't we go back to Egypt? It's safer there. And he says, no. It's time to go forward. And if I can get your attention just for a second here, just look up here. I want to pass to you all for a minute, okay? Some of you in here, you would love to go forward, but you're racked by guilt from your past. And I got good news for you. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ, on his behalf, I want to tell you, you are forgiven. You are freed from your past. God does not want you to bring it up ever again. Take the pack of past guilt, take it off, let it go. And when you walk out of here today, free yourself, because if you've been bothered by your past for a long time and you walk in here and feel guilty week after week, let it go and hear the words of Jesus Christ. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. God has better days ahead for you, no matter what your past is like. Let the past go. Why? Nobody goes forward well when they are looking back. Look at the person next to you. Look in their eyes. Just look in their eyes real quick. Okay? I know if you don't know them, don't touch them. Just look at them. Okay? What's interesting is this. Raise your hand if the person you looked at, the eyes were on the front of their head. Okay? You know what's interesting is? It is no accident that God did not put your eyes on the back of your head. Why? He has no interest in you going backwards. And Moses says, go forward, and I love this. And he said, and as you're going forward, do this. Expect God to work. Expect. In other words, if I will let go of those first 5 things, and then if I will fight off fear, take a stand, rely on God, go forward, you can actually expect God to show up and work in your life, and you can expect God to show up. And what happens is this. Check it out. Just look up here, okay? You can read these verses later. What happens is this. Moses gets out his staff, and for the first time, they go forward. What happens to the Red Sea? It parts, and 2 billion people, including the sluggard on the back, they all walk through. And then the Egyptian army goes, let's go after him and kill him. They go in, and what happens to them? They end up drowning. Now, occasionally, I've talked to skeptics, and skeptics have said, I don't believe the Bible's true. I don't think it's accurate history. Matter of fact, some skeptics said this. This didn't really happen. The Red Sea is not the Red Sea. It is the Sea of Reeds. Anybody heard that? And it wasn't like a sea. It was like 6 inches of water. It was like a swamp. Folks, either way, you got a genuine miracle. Either you have the miracle of an entire sea being parted and the whole nation goes through, or you have the maybe even better miracle of a highly trained, highly equipped Egyptian army with chariots, spears, all drowning in 6 inches of water. It's like, oh, I'm up to my ankles got wet. Somebody stabbed me. I mean, either way, you got a genuine miracle, okay? Now, look up here for a second. I have one more point to make, and then we'll break. Sometimes you come to stuff like this, and you hear pastors preach like this, and you're like, Ray's got it all together. This message means a lot to me, and let me tell you why. I'm a recovering fearaholic. Maybe that's put it best way. I mean, if you can be afraid of something, I am. And a few years ago, this is kind of my own embarrassing testimony, my wife and I were living in Chicago. Don't ever do that. That's a major mistake. And worse than Florida. And we're living in Chicago. And then we moved back to California, and we moved to Folsom. You know where Folsom is? Moved to Folsom. Carol was on parole, so that was real handy for my wife. I'm kidding. And we moved to Folsom, and I am having a blast because I am writing, traveling, speaking, and training leaders. I am having a blast. I'm coaching churches, stuff like that. And then, and I'm not a pastor. I do not want to be a pastor. You got to be crazy to be a pastor. Jeremy, you got to be nuts. I mean, pastors get too much attention, too much affection, and too much attack. It's too hard of a job. I did not want to be a pastor. I'm having a great time, traveling, speaking, all doing all this kind of stuff. A little group of people in Granite Bay. Anybody been to Granite Bay? Granite Bay, okay, I just like the tribe shirt. Little group of people in Granite Bay have, they want to start a church to reach teenagers because they had some teenage suicides. So they come to me and say, hey, would you come up and start a church in Granite Bay and pastor a church in Granite Bay? And I said, no. Anybody else know that verse in the Bible that says, Lord, here am I, send somebody else? You know that verse? I apply that verse. And these people bugged us for 6 months. I mean, over and over and over again, they bugged us. Come on. Matter of fact, anybody here know what a fax is? Okay, raise your hand. If you raise your hand, okay? You're old. They and I get a fax one time, and the fax says, to Ray Johnston from God. Direct message from heaven, and right at the last word, I'm not making this up, plant the stupid church. I mean, I am getting faxed by these people on behalf of God. And I'm saying, no. Now, to be honest, and this is embarrassing to admit, the reason I didn't want to start this church was this. I was afraid. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid to be a pastor. I was afraid we'd try to start a church and nobody'd come. I was afraid we'd try to start a church and people would come, but no help would come. I was afraid we'd try to start a church, people would come, but I wouldn't like them. I was afraid we'd try to start a church, people would come, help would come, I'd like them, but then we'd have to find facilities. We'd have to actually raise money and build a building, and I'd have to talk about money, and boy, don't you love it when the pastor talks about money. I was afraid of everything. I never had the guts to tell anybody that I was afraid. I would say things like this, the Lord hath not called his servant Ray to do with this. And so for 6 months, these people bugged us so much for 6 months. Finally, I took the coward's way out. And I said, okay, here's the deal. I will come up there. I will coach you. We will do some prayer meetings, a couple test services, but then we will call in a pastor, and under no circumstances will I become the pastor of this church. I think God's looking down going, oh, yeah? And so I think, and I'm not even sure it's going to happen anyway. So we do a prayer meeting. 26 people show up to the prayer meeting. I mean, you cannot launch a church with 26. 26 people do a prayer meeting. I walk out of that prayer meeting and I go, I don't think this church is going to happen. We go, let's do another prayer meeting. Maybe it'll skyrocket. So we do a second prayer meeting and it skyrockets from 26 to 28. So I don't think this thing's going to happen. So we basically go, let's try a test service, a preview service to see if anybody shows up. And if nobody shows up, there's no need. We just pack this thing and don't do it. And I'm kind of a happier guy. And so we do a test service. We actually we got to name a church. We're going to name it. We named it Bayside. We almost named it Baywatch. We named it Bayside. That was probably a smart move. So we named it Bayside. It's Granite Bay, which is sort of, anybody been to Granite Bay? It's kind of like stuck up Sacramento. So is this being taped? That's not good. So we name it Bayside. We rent the Granite Bay Tennis Country Club Equestrian Center for our first service. Well, I arrive. Here's the room. The room is like about 105 people in an upper room, and well, there's 105 chairs. Well, I'm convinced no more than 40 or 50 people are coming max. So Mr. Faith here, I take down half the chairs. So it will look full when only 40 people are there. How many of you know what I'm talking about? It's called room management, okay? Now, it starts raining. I take down another 20 chairs, okay? I have no explanation for this. 162 people show up to our first service. The problem is, so we shut all the chairs back up I took down. We stacked the room with people. We lined the walls. Then we got 40 people that can't make it upstairs. So we go downstairs to the country club lobby. They have a big screen TV and a fireplace. We unplug the NFL game. We plug in our worship service. I go down halfway through the service to apologize to these poor people because they couldn't make it up. And here's what I see. 40 people are in this lobby. One really sharp 50-year-old Granite Bay woman is sitting in an overstuffed chair, drinking cappuccino by a roaring fire on a rainy day, watching our service on big screen TV. She looks up and says, I like this church. Thank you. You're very gracious. So I go back up. We're a Bayside. We're a pretty simple church, okay? Like when somebody goes, what's your model? In-N-Out burger. They have a simple menu? So do we. Worship and teach the Bible, okay? And at the end of the message, right before I closed, I went, wait, I'm going to give an invitation. I think a ton of these people aren't Christians because they were pretty sharp looking. And so I decide to give an invitation. And so I give a crystal clear invitation to commit your heart and life to Jesus Christ, the Savior, Lord, for the first time. And then I go, if you prayed that prayer, raise your hand. Wham! Half the hands in the room go up. Unbelievable. And a sea of people becomes Christians on our very first service. The problem is this. We thought we'd do one service, nobody shows up, and we're done. At the end of that service, I got up and said, hey, thanks for coming. We don't actually have a church. I was like, just kidding. And we had no future plans. So I actually said this, we'll do this again in a month. Well, the country club didn't want us back because we had too many people. So we ran an elementary school down the street. I arrive a month later. There are 150 chairs set up. Well, I'm convinced no more than 100 people are coming back. So Mr. Faith here, I take down 50 chairs. 226 people show up that day. We worship, teach the Bible. Again, a sea of people become Christians. Well, I get up at the end. Thanks for coming. We don't have a church. Just kidding. We'll do this again in a month. Once a month, church is just about perfect, don't you think? Jerry, I'm kidding. So we wrap up that second service, and instead of going home, I went to the airport and flew to Chicago to a massive prayer summit at the Hyatt O'Hare Airport Hotel, and it is the second night, and my life has never recovered. It's the second night of a prayer. Anybody here ever been in a prayer meeting? Well, let me try this. Anybody ever pray? Good. Anybody been in a prayer meeting? Anybody ever been in a long late-night prayer meeting? People, this is like a multi-hour long late-night prayer meeting. And I mean, it is like 11 o'clock at night. I have been praying for 2 solid hours in this thing. And to be honest with you, I'm like prayed out. I mean, I have prayed for everything I could think of 5 times. I'm making up stuff and praying for it. Lord, bless my children's, grandchildren's pets. I mean, I'm to that point. And then I think, wait a second, like 11 o'clock at night, I think, wait a second, this is perfect. I should pray for Bayside that God would give it the right pastor because it's not going to be moi. So I got my Bible there. I grab my Bible, and I'm praying, and I'm telling God stuff he already knows. I'm going, Lord, there were 226 people there on Sunday. They need a pastor. God, remember you said the harvest is ripe, which it looks like, and the laborers are few, which he doesn't exist yet. Pray to the Lord, that'd be you. I'm doing all this kind of stuff, and then I'm praying like, God, give it the right pastor. That person's probably in this. I actually am looking around the room at 2,000 other Christian leaders praying. I'm going, God, the person's probably in here. Light them up. I'll go talk to them. Levitate them, make it obvious. And I'm praying like this has never happened to me before. It has never happened since. I don't actually like it when pastors get up and say, God is telling us to do this, because then you can't argue with them. Who knows? And this has never happened to me before, and it has never happened since. While I'm praying that God would give Bayside the right pastor, right then in this prayer meeting, God says to me, read Acts 18. I'm like, read Acts 18. I open up my Bible, I turn to Acts 18, and I look down, and it says these words. The Lord said to Paul in the night, which this was, by a vision, which this is starting to feel like. You know what the next 4 words were? Do not be afraid. My first thought, to be honest with you, is, oh no, I do not want to do this. I'm going to keep reading. There's got to be a loophole here somewhere. And it says, do not be afraid, for I have many people in the city. And God said, if you do this, I will rally people to help you, which is our number one fear. You know what's interesting is, my wife and I, we are not from Sacramento. We are not from Folsom. We had a home in Marin County. We were planning on moving back to Marin County, back to the Bay Area. I'd already been back to prepare it until I read the next irritating verse, which, check this out, says, Paul stayed where he was and taught the word of God. Yeah, applaud for me. Your moment's coming. And you know what? I do 2 things I never do. I actually got up and walked out of the prayer meeting. I start crying. I go to elevator to the 6th floor, and you husbands will get this. I called my wife to find out if I've actually really heard from God or not. How many of you husbands know exactly what I'm talking about? And I tell her what just happened. She starts crying on the phone. She'd already started a Bible study in Granite Bay. Women were flocking into it. The wife of the coach of the Kings at that time was coming. She'd already started. And she said, Carol starts crying on the phone, and she says, I knew God was calling us to do this. She goes, but because you're a guy, I've been praying that God would make it real obvious. How many of you women know exactly what she was saying? Oh, all those hands went up. Look at that. And you know what's funny, people, to be honest with you, I have never done anything like this in my life. I'm a list strategy, all that kind of person. I basically we prayed together and committed ourselves to be the pastor of this church, went home, launched a church, and to be honest with you, I have never seen anything like it. We have had people. By the way, we are not a secret church. We are a verse-by-verse expository Bible teaching church. We are leadership development. We disciple people. We have incredible. Lincoln Bruce is our worship leader who blows the roof off. I have never seen anything like it. 26 people has become last weekend 14,000 something or other people. We have multiple campuses. We are getting ready. By the way, hold your applause on this. I also got to say this: big isn't better than small. You know, it's big is, and by the way, small isn't better either. I'll bet your church gets criticized for being big occasionally, which is insane. Because my goal would be, let's overpopulate heaven. But by the way, big isn't better, and small isn't better. Healthy is better. God honoring is better. Christ-like is better. Bible believing is better. Unleashing compassion is better. That stuff's better. Okay, having a pastor like Jeremy, having a staff like yours that live as examples, that stuff's better. Okay, but 26 people has blown up. We have relatives we've been praying for 25 years meet Jesus in our church. We have had people meet Christ in every single service every week for 20 straight years. I have never seen anything like it. We have had my own kids made commitments to Christ in our church. We're discipled in our church, and all of them are in some aspect of ministry right now because of our church. I am having more. The last 10 years, I've had more fun, seen God do more miracles, watch God answer more prayers. The last 10 years have been by far my best 10 years. And the reason I am telling you this whole thing is this: I almost missed the best 10-year run of my life. I almost missed the best thing God would ever do in my life, in my family, through my life. I almost missed the whole reason God put me on this planet for one reason: fear. We have a definition of fear we use at Bayside, and here it is. Fear is the dark room where negatives develop. Fear is the dark room where negatives develop. And the reason I'm telling you this whole thing is this: I want to put one last massive Moses promised land, your future point up. And here it is. When you say yes to God, incredible things happen. Think about it for a second. When Moses stops making excuses, stops saying no. Think, the minute Moses says yes to God, think of what happens. You got 2 million people being freed, the Red Sea parting, the 10 Commandments, the first 5 books of the Bible, the miracle of manna, the promised land, Mount Sinai, the glory of God. The second set, Moses finally said yes to God, incredible things happen in his future. The minute you say yes to God, incredible things will happen in your future. There are way too many Christians saying no to following Jesus, no to, there are a lot of Christians going, I'm spectating, they say no to service. I'm tipping, they say no to tithing. I'm critical, they say no to loving. The minute you say yes, incredible things happen. However, here's point 2. Nothing much ever happens to people that just keep saying no. Nothing much happens to you. And if you want the rest of your life to be the best of your life, I believe this: the great adventure of your life can happen at any age, but it will never happen if you keep saying no to God. And what I want to say is this: if some of you are in here and you're going, shouldn't have come this morning. God's been on my back. God's been tapping my shoulder, and God has been telling me there are some areas you got to let go. There are some things where I want you to say yes to me, and you know it, and your heart's beating a little faster right now, and you're going, here's what I say to you: just say yes to God. Why? Because you, just like what happened to me, if you fight off fear, live by faith, and say yes, you just might be on the first day of the best next 10-year run of your life. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes and shut out everybody around you? And if you're here going, man, you know what? God brought me here this morning. It's no accident. So he could get your attention. So he could say to you, say yes to letting go of your past. Say yes to following Jesus with everything you've got. And whatever he asks you to do, say yes. And I'm going to pray a very simple prayer. If you're going, man, I would love to be forgiven. I would love to have a clean slate and a new start. I would love to be set free from my past. I would love to say yes to following Jesus Christ with everything I got. I'm going to pray a prayer and invite you to pray it with me with all your heart. I'll pray out loud. You can pray silently, but if this is what you need, pray with me right now, would you? Lord Jesus, thank you for your love. I believe you died on a cross and rose, which means you're right here and you have all the power I need. And right now, I say yes to you. I commit myself to you. I ask you to forgive me for all my sin. And this morning, I let the past go. Come into my life. I receive you, Jesus Christ, this morning. Be my Savior. Be my Lord. Call the shots. Whatever you tell me, I'm saying in advance, yes. Thank you for your love. And with your heads bowed and eyes closed and nobody looking around, if you prayed that prayer, I just want to give you a chance to respond, because I believe you're on the first day of the best next run of your life. So if you prayed that prayer this morning, I'm going to give you a chance to acknowledge that. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. You know what? If you raise your hand, nothing weird's going to happen. Nobody's going to reach over and touch you on the nose or anything like that. Okay? But if you prayed that prayer, I would love to pray for you that the rest of your life would be the best of your life. So if you prayed that prayer, on the count of 3, raise your hand. Here we go. 1, no, not yet. No, yeah. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Go for it. It's awesome. This is a seed. Keep them way up. Lord God of the universe, we know you're here. And I pray that your spirit would surround each one of these men and women. May they know the joy that comes to people whose past is forgiven. Help them to let go of their past. May they know the hope that comes to people who rely on the promises of God and know the future has been secured forever. Bless their lives. Bless their families. Help them to stay faithful, to continue to say yes to you. And we thank you for this in Jesus' name. God's people said, amen.